Welcome. My name is Rick Ulfik. I'm founder of We the World and the We campaign at we.net. And I want to thank you, Jim Garrison and Rick Buckley, along with Ubiquity University and Humanity Rising, for broadcasting all of the 11 Days of Global Unity Summit panels and for offering master's degree scholarships in peace and tolerance, as well as regenerative action, to our volunteers in honor of our dear friend Avon Madison from Pathways to Peace for 11 Days of Global Unity. I and we greatly appreciate your partnership and collaboration. So you can find out about all of the 11 Days of Global Unity broadcasts and events by going to we.net. And we invite you to collaborate with us on as a volunteer or an organization partner. That's all you have to do is just go to we.net. It's all there. And today, for our 11 Days of Global Unity Summit panel on economic justice, we are excited to have with us Hazel Henderson and Alexander Laszlo. And my co-host for today is Jack Strasberg, who is a coordinator for We the World's campaign for economic justice. Jack was a Tucson Peace Center board member for 30 years, and he was a founding member of his local, state, and the national Green parties. He served on the National Green Council for 4 years, and he actually ran for public office. Welcome to the broadcast, Jack Strasberg, and can you please give us a brief overview about creating an economy that works for all? And then we will bring in our guests, Hazel Henderson and Alexander Laszlo. Take it away, Jack. And you are muted. There you go.
All right. So anyway, so in order to keep this brief, I think the question about the world that works for all, if we're looking at why we need it, we're dealing with a situation where, well, let's put it this way. We the World has a mission statement, and the central theme of that mission statement is to work towards a world that works for all. And I really have a hard time envisioning a world that works for all without an economy that works for all. So it's pretty much an absolute necessity. And again, the need is also there because, I mean, the economy that's out there is outrageously inadequate when it comes to putting something together that's working for all. We have people that have hundreds of billions of dollars in personal wealth, while others are sleeping on the streets, and tens of millions of people don't even have health insurance. So I don't think there's any doubt that there's a need to put something together that's a lot different than what we have today. And when I look at it from the project that I'm working on from that perspective, is what I want to do is kind of take a look at what's already out there. How do we get this going? Who's already doing it? And then it's a good permaculture tenet that when you're trying to get something going, you look out there and see what's working and you support it. And so there are businesses out there, there are ethical conscious businesses out there, and there's networks like the Solidarity Economy Network and the New Economy Coalition and the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops, which I like the best. I think worker co-ops are the absolute best way to go about business. So anyway, they're out there, so we should try to put together our what I call our natural constituency, and that's all the people out there who are also trying to build a world that's working for all, and get them to patronize businesses that are ethical and conscious, and do that in a very focused and very coordinated and organized way. Because if we don't do it in a very organized way, we're not going to have a whole lot of impact on what goes on. So I think when you're looking for a world that works for all or an economy that works for all, the first step is to get the movement of people who want that to happen a lot better organized, coordinated, and collaborative. So anyway, so we look at the supporting these businesses that are already out there. And that all of them can certainly use a lot of investment capital. And that's something that Hazel has worked on a lot, is investing in ethical businesses. And that's what we want to do if we can afford it. But most of us, of course, don't have that kind of money laying around that we can do a lot of that. But what we do is we spend tens of thousands of dollars a year on goods and services, desires and needs. And if we can handle that properly, what I call properly or in a good way, we can take that purchasing power wealth and we can turn it into investment wealth. And how we do that, of course, is to patronize the businesses that are out there already doing the job. And I think most people involved in creating this new world or this movement, I really think it's a good thing to vote for their dollars. And we've all heard that term. And so when it's convenient, when it's easy, when they think of it, we do that. The problem is we don't do it very consistently. We don't do it in a very organized fashion. And we don't do it, I guess, very well. But it's not because we don't want to do it. We do want to do it. But it's just not easy. It's difficult. How do you find conscious businesses? How do you separate or be able to figure out who's who in the zoo, so to speak? And a real big one is that a lot of the things that we need and want just plain are not out there ethically. So we have to work on that one as well. So that basically is where the focus is now, is trying to put together a way to increase this and make it easier for people to invest. Because we figure that if we make it easier for people to invest in ethical businesses, then a lot more of it will happen. And therefore we put together the We Store. And the We Store is what I call the loving and caring alternative to Amazon. And since I want to keep this short, I'll just make this short. All you have to do is look at what Amazon has done as an online store or market. And that gives us an idea of what maybe the We Store can do if we can just keep focused on it and work on it and do it in a good way. So I'm going to let that go for now.
Yeah. So in other words, to make it possible for people to support the ethical and socially conscious businesses in an easy way by purchasing what they would want to get anyway. And this would be an alternative to what Amazon has been doing, which has a lot of elements of exploitation involved. So,
well, thank you. Very well put.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. And so let's bring in our first guest. Hazel Henderson is a dear friend of mine and a wonderful collaborator and partner with We the World for many years. In fact, she was one of the honorary co-chairs who helped to launch 11 Days of Global Unity back in 2004, along with Jane Goodall, Desmond Tutu, Marianne Williamson, Robert Thurman, a long list of folks. And Hazel is a visionary thinker and an acclaimed evolutionary economist. She is president of Ethical Markets Media, and she is the author of Mapping the Global Transition to the Solar Age. Welcome to the broadcast, Hazel Henderson.
Thank you so much, dear Rick. It's always an honor to be introduced by you. So yes, we can build this world we all know we need, which is a world that works for everyone, an economy that works for everyone. And I'm thinking of dear Buckminster Fuller, who talked about this so many years ago. And basically what we need to do is to look at the way the game is played, go to the top of the food chain, the way the financial game is played, how the rules are set up, and how the metrics buttress the unsustainable, unfair rules which keep replicating inequality. So many years ago in my book, Politics of the Solar Age, I created this visual of the way the economy is actually working and why we have to completely change the economic model. And I don't know whether we can pull up that diagram of mine of the cake. Is that there somewhere? There we go. Because, you know, a visual is worth 1,000 words. And I can remember drawing this to, you know, I remember my daughter coming into my office. She was about 11 years old. And she said, "Mom, what do you do?" And I'm saying, well, I'm trying to correct the economics, which keeps replicating inequality. And so I visualize it really, the total productive system of all societies is like a 3-layer cake with icing on the top. And only the top 2 layers, the private sector and the public sector, are actually conducted in money. And that's all economists recognize, the GDP and all the macroeconomic statistics. And they completely ignore the 2 foundational layers of the cake. And that is the love economy, which is much larger than the market sectors. And that's the caring, sharing, cooperative, traditional economies in all societies, sort of based on the golden rule of mutual support and mutual aid and bartering. Don't use money. And of course, a lot of this work is unpaid. And a lot of it, of course, is done by the world's women. And actually, I helped the UN Human Development Group when they did the first stab they took at estimating the value of that unpaid caring, sharing sector, which enfolds and supports all of the market price system which economists pay attention to. And they discovered in 1995, where the total global GDP was, I think, $24 trillion, something like that, that, my gosh, there was 16 trillion of estimated unpaid work, 11 trillion by women, raising children, taking care of households, serving the community like I saw my mother do all my life, and 5 trillion done by men who were, you know, building houses and digging latrines and all of those kinds of things. And so imagine if that 16 trillion had been added in as the productive work that year, it would have expanded the global GDP to 40 trillion. And I'm not saying that we ever want to turn this wonderful caring, sharing work into money, but we must recognize it. And of course, the foundational layer of our economies is the productivity of Mother Nature. And we're just discovering that now. What happens when you lose that, when you lose species, you lose biodiversity? Economies, those top 2 layers, collapse into inflation, and basically they run out of resources. So, okay, so that's the starting point. is figuring out how to change the metrics so that we include all the productive work. And we can take that off there now, and people can find that. My gosh, that little drawing went into dozens of different languages and is available on our site, can be downloaded. So basically, I don't know whether I can get my unmuted. Yes, I'm trying to. So basically, what we need to do is to recognize all of this caring work. And I think so few people actually recognize today that the number of human beings on planet Earth who are already employed in cooperatives is basically, there's more people who work in cooperatives on this planet than all of the for-profit corporations combined. So you see how poor this model is. And so what for example, what Joe Biden is trying to do now with his social safety net expansion is actually recognizing for the first time how essential the caring sectors are. And so it's really the 3.5 trillion he's talking about over 10 years is not enough, but it's a wonderful start. And it's the first time really that we have actually, since the New Deal in the US, this is the first time we've actually addressed supporting the caring unpaid sectors of the economy. And we're investing in Head Start and investing in raising our children. And how did it happen that our education under GDP, the money model, education is considered consumption? Whereas actually, of course, education is the foundational investment we make in raising healthy, productive, loving, caring systems and human beings. And so what I've been covering really all my life is I've been kind of addressing finance quite directly because, you know, I helped when I was an advisor to the Calvert Group, I helped to work with them on looking at better corporations and better models of more ethical corporations, where we looked at all of the, we tried to focus on getting rid of the polluters and the companies that were involved in weapons and unfair to their workers. And I suddenly realized after developing those screens for corporations, and there are now 600 mutual funds that use these kind of criteria. So it's now a very popular form of investing. But I went up the food chain because I decided that corporations were actually still puppets of finance. And so most of the work of Ethical Markets Media is challenging the financial model, which is still based on that old cake, the top two layers of the cake, and completely ignoring the care economy and the productivity of nature. So we have a TV show on ethical markets called The Money Fix, and it's 1 hour, and we've distributed it to PBS stations a couple of times by satellite. And it explains the politics of money creation and how our money is actually created, by central banks. And this is okay. That's what central banks are supposed to do, and treasuries. They're supposed to create our money supply. The question is, who do they give it to? And the old textbook model of that cake ends up giving that money back to the big banks on Wall Street, where the textbooks say it's supposed to trickle down and fertilize all of the real economy on Main Street. And so the second part of our special, after talking about the politics of the way that money supply is created, is we look at local currencies. And all over the world, local communities decide in many, many countries, oh, well, if our big croupier at the central bank in our country is not going to create enough chips for us to complete our local trades, guess what? We're going to create our own chips. So you have many, many communities now doing this. And one of the most famous examples is my friend Susan Witt at the Schumacher Society, who helped create the currency called Bert shares, which means that this community in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, all of the people in that community have US dollars in one pocket. If they need to go outside the community and use the national money, and in the other pocket, they have Berkshires for all of the local community needs. And all 6 banks in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, will accept Berkshires as well as dollars. So you see how creative human beings are. And so basically, what we need to do now is to look at this way of seeing the way the game is set up. And a lot of people now, I remember doing an interview, which you can find on Forbes magazine, on economic inequality. And I go through all of the history of how we have tried to create broader purchasing power through giving people guaranteed basic incomes. That's another way of doing it. Okay, we have to maintain the purchasing power because otherwise the economy will collapse. You've got all of this cornucopia of goods and services being produced, a lot of it by automation. And if people don't have the purchasing power to consume, to buy those things, then you have a lack of the aggregate demand which is needed. And so you end up with a recession. So all of these things really are now on the table. And I'm really excited that so many of our NGO friends all over the world now, particularly a group I work with a lot called Positive Money in London and Brussels, and they are confronting the Bank of England, and in Europe, Christine Lagarde at the European Central Bank, and they're saying, look, if you're going to create our money by buying dud mortgages and running up, the housing sector, a bubble, we are going to keep on critiquing you and telling you that you must, if you're going to do that, buy green bonds. And so basically there are all kinds of really good ways now at all levels, from the family to the community to the highest levels of finance are actually now involved, and mostly through citizen action all over the world, to change that game. And I recently did a short article on this that you may enjoy, which is on our website, ethicalmarkets.com. And it's called Valuing Our Love Economies. And so we can do this. And we have to thank all of those who went before us, particularly Buckminster Fuller, who always knew that we could create a world that works for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hazel. Sorry, I gotta get my light back on here. Thank you so much, Hazel. And I want to ask you, because you were talking about the global economy being in 1995 about $25 trillion. I think it's much larger now, and there's also this whole sort of dark part of the economy that's socked away in these places like the Cayman Islands and all that. The Paradise Papers and the other one came out, and they said that there's like something like 20 to 35 trillion dollars now that's not accessible to governments, like in the form of taxes or anything that could be. And that's yet another sector, right? Besides the caring economy that's not counted. And, I'm just wondering if you want to talk about that. And
I'd love to, yes, because you're absolutely right, Rick. And I think that I've been watching this for many, many years and promoting the idea of financial transaction taxes, just to say we get taxed for a cup of coffee that we buy, and that has been fiercely resisted for 30 years. And I've been pushing that idea, but basically it's now resurrected. I'm so happy to see it resurrected in Joe Biden's new legislation, which Bernie Sanders is pushing. And they're saying, hey, all of these arguments that the 1% are making right now, oh my God, it's too much money, we can't spend all of that money, blah, blah, blah. And they're saying, well, hey, look, we're going to pay for it all. And we'll pay for it just by having the 55 largest companies that paid no tax in 2020. And all of this enormous amount of money, which is sucked away in these, havens, these tax havens, and we can pay for the whole thing and have plenty left over. And Elizabeth Warren's been saying this for years, and we now need the Democrats to be courageous enough to stick with this, and say, it's not a matter of taxing income. We have to tax the wealth that these people create. Otherwise, they're like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. And, they take this money and do their little escapades, into space. And we think it's great for them to take those, but leave the money here with us. Right, and we will distribute it in a more fair and equitable way.
There you go. Thank you, Hazel. Let's bring in our next guest for today's show, Alexander Laszlo, PhD, is president of the and I'm probably not going to pronounce some of these words properly, but Bertalanffy. The Bertalanffy Center for the Study of Systems Science. So I'll say it again. Alexander Laszlo is president of the Bertalanffy Center for the Study of Systems Science. He is research director of the Laszlo Institute for New Paradigm Research and chief edunaut of the Evolutionary Learning Ecosystems program at the Vivier Agradecidos in Argentina, where he currently resides. He is professor of systems science and curated emergence, author of over 100 journal, book, and encyclopedia publications. And he is also a sixth degree black belt in traditional Taekwondo. Welcome to the broadcast, Alexander Laszlo.
Well, goodness, thank you so much for all of that and for working your way through the Bertalanffy, Ludwig von Bertalanffy. Yeah, he's another B there along with Buckminster Fuller. Our B's are all lining up. And I just want to say again, thank you for doing this. Thank you for hosting this together with Jack and for having Hazel and me. It's just such an honor to be here with Hazel as well. So what we are looking at today is exactly, well, these are the 11 days of global unity, right? And these global unity, and I think what we're looking at right now with regard to the things that Jack was saying, what Hazel was just sharing with us is about how we can engage with unity without uniformity. You know, there's this sense that we are really, all of us are in this. Unity is important, but not monolithic unity, and diversity without fragmentation. So we can have the unity in diversity, but truly it is an engaged, interactive, and really dynamic way. This is something that I heard Jack emphasizing when he was talking about looking out into the world, a kind of permaculture view, seeing what works, right? What's working out in the world, and building on that. And this is the same thing that Hazel was saying, right? I mean, this is finding out how the game is played. That's the word she used. How's the game played? What's going on in the world now? And this is where I think that the kind of framework that biomimicry, for example, brings in, what Janine Benyus was doing, and indeed what Hazel has done with Janine Benyus, right, to establish the principles of ethical biomimicry finance, right? The two of them have gotten together to create these principles for investing that looks at what would nature do? How does nature work? Looking at nature as mentor, knowing that nature has had 3.8 billion years to figure out how to make things work well together. And the Anthropocene, if you think about it, is some 11,000 years. You know, we are newbies at this. So how can nature help us? And I think that is a huge part of this. In nature, you look out there and it is not survival of the fittest. It is not nature being red in tooth and claw, but it is truly a matter of co-evolution, of working with. This is what we are relearning now. And so let me share with you just a few slides, if I may, some things that I've prepared, kind of build on this a little bit. Call that up right here and get this program started here. Okay, so here, what I want to share with you is just some ideas on a systems view of economic justice, because a lot of my work and my background, as Hazel knows very well as well, is in the area of systems thinking, and not just systems thinking, but systems being. How can we be the systems we wish to see in the world, right? You know, these living systems, these juicy, alive systems, not just the computer systems. So let's look a little bit about what's happening in the world. This is something that was said by Victor Lebow, and it's kind of interesting. He said, our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed, burned, worn out, replaced, and discarded at an ever-increasing rate. I mean, isn't that kind of like how things are in this mindless economy that we have now, not the kind that Hazel is pointing towards, but the kind that we kind of are living into. Victor said this, but what's incredible is that he said this over 65 years ago, and we're still doing this. How do we address that three-layered cake that Hazel was talking about to be the change? Well, let's look at a little bit what's going on in the marketplace right now. The dialogue is, you've got a problem, and I've got a product. And if you don't have a problem, I'll make you think you have one, and then I'll sell you my product, right? I mean, this is the kind of vicious cycle in a way. It's virtuous in its own bubble, because it works in a bubble, this capitalism, consumerism, materialism, and it feeds on itself. But in the long run, the questions we must ask is, where is this taking us? This is what Hazel has been dedicating her life to in such brilliant, brilliant ways. So the questions I think for us to think about as we work through this is, for example, given what Victor Lebow was noting 65 years ago, is there more leisure time as we keep on burning out things, as we keep on consuming? Are we more in control? Whatever that means to you, are we more in control? Are developed nations, the UN talks about MDCs, more developed nations, but are they more stable? I wouldn't even talk about them as developed nations. Think places like the U.S. is a poster child for this, and I'm living in Argentina now, so I see this from a little further away. But and many of the G7 are, I would call them overdeveloped nations, not developed nations. They're overdeveloped. It's just like you can become obese if you feed yourself with fast food and cheap calories, as they're called, and you can be undernourished at the same time as you are obese. This is an overdeveloped state, and I think places that are like the US are like that. Are LDCs, less developed nations, are they catching up, closing the gap? Do people lead better lives, live better lives? And I think this is the kind of thing that we're asking ourselves, why do we need to have these 11 days of global unity? What are we looking for to be the change we wish to see in the world? And so a lot of what Hazel has been working on here is about these ethical frameworks. This is something that I'm bringing in also that complements, comes from the work of Carolyn Merchant, who is a political philosopher at Berkeley. And she talks about egocentric, homocentric, and egocentric ethics. I've added the evolutionary centric, the patterning over time, the egocentric ethics to this. But for example, just a little example as she gives between somebody who's an egocentric ethic, which is me first. I have to look out for number one. And if everybody looked out for number one, like me, then we wouldn't have anybody who is being a drag on the system. Everybody would be taking care of themselves. So we should just be looking out for ourselves. And then nobody would be needed to be supported. That's the egocentric ethic. There's a lot of holes in that argument. Homocentric ethic is just, let's just take care of everything for humanity. You know, we want our grandchildren to be able to see real live orangutans, maybe even in zoos, but not just in picture books. Let's take care so that we preserve them. But there's no thinking about the rights of the orangutans, the rights of nature. That's not in the homocentric ethics. The ecocentric ethic says, you know, we are this living planet. And there's this little dialogue that Carolyn Merchant sets up between somebody who is in the Amazon rainforest, where they're having a project to cut down much of the rainforest and develop a shopping mall. And the developer is talking to somebody who is the egocentric ethic person, who has tied themselves to a tree and says, you know, you want to do this, you have to cut me down. And he said, well, why are you, the egocentric guy who's developing the shopping mall says, why are you standing in the way of progress? We're bringing jobs, we're bringing technology, we're bringing products here to the shopping mall. People are going to be able to join, you know, the international marketplace. You're in the way of progress. What tree has asked you to stand up for it? And the person who is in the ecocentric frame responds to this, saying, you know, I am not just a human being trying to protect the rainforest. I am part of the rainforest trying to protect itself. Boom. Change of identity. I am part of the rainforest trying to protect itself. How are we going to shift our sense of being, our sense of presence on this planet? When we say we are the world, Rick, you know, that's the frame here, then this world is truly an interactive, living, loving place. And so this for me is the way. And I think the dictums that we have to work with is live simply so that others may simply live. Not just live and let live. That's nice, live and let live. But really, this planet has, as Gandhi said, has enough to meet everyone's need, but not enough to meet everyone's greed. And this is why it's important to live simply so that others may simply live. This is what nature does. And again, biomimicry is key to that. So one more thing as I share here, I'm going to stop this sharing and just share with you some sites that might be of interest to you with regard to the work that I'm doing here on this. So right here, this is that famous place over here. This is the Bert Lumpy Center for the Study of System Science. What do we do there? In this institution, this organization is based in Vienna, in Austria, and what we explore is how the systems perspective, something that Hazel emphasizes so strongly, how this is important to be able to understand that we're part of living systems, living, loving systems, and truly empathy as a basis for that kind of way of being. So this is part of that effort at the Bert Lumpy Center. The other one I want to bring to your attention for anyone who's interested is that the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research has 7 different research areas here. So you can see all the various ones here. But for example, we have a whole area in new paradigm business. We're looking at quantum leadership and impact and systemic innovation, where we are part of, where nature is part of the innovation, where it's not just technological innovation or even social innovation divorced from its living systemic context. So systemic innovation includes that. If anyone is interested in having research along these lines, you can just get in touch with the Laszlo Institute, and we are doing programs like this actively. I just want to put that there for people to find constructive ways of engaging with the challenges to be the change we wish to see in the world. And I think there's so much more to say. I'm sure Hazel feels the same way, but I'm going to put a pause here so we can have a bit of group dialogue on this as well. Thank you.
Yeah, that is so wonderful. What a nice overview and a whole systems approach. Even your presentation was a whole systems approach, which is very much appreciated. I especially liked when you were talking about "We Are the World," you know, which is, it's always fun to have a popular song as your theme song, right? For "We the World." So, but it's that idea of expanding we and we consciousness to go beyond your immediate loved ones. You know, we always say, you know, if you're talking about we, who is your we, right? Is it your family? You know, what are we doing on the weekend? But does that include your pets? Does it include your plants of, you know, your we? Is it beyond your neighborhoods, your communities, your ethnic groups, your religious groups? Is it beyond the human family entirely? Does it include the other parts of life on the planet, the other forms of life? And does it include the ecosystems that support all life? So the expanded concept of we is exactly what you're talking about. And I just wanted to mention, you didn't finish when you were saying the egocentric ethics, the homocentric ethics, the ecocentric ethics, but there was one more, which I don't think you talked about, evocentric ethics. And is that evolution centric? Is that what evo is, or what is that?
Yes, it exactly is. You're exactly right. You know, when I didn't have a slide there and I was talking about it once, I talked about evocentric ethics. People heard evil-centric ethics. No. It's EVO for evolution. Exactly right. Why? Because the egocentric ethics views all life as being sacred, and that's very important. And I have no qualms with that. All life is sacred, and if we seek to preserve and all life now as is, there will be no place for change and turnover. Understanding the natural patterns of change, understanding that there are processes in which a dominant regime, a dominant species moves aside and a new one comes in. Very important. Over 99% of all species that have ever existed are now extinct on this planet. But we have a burgeoning planet right now because we couldn't have place for all of the species to live here at the same time, right? So you need to have transition. So the evolutionary centric frame allows for transition, conserving patterns of thriving, patterns of flourishing, but not conserving simply all that is currently alive. In looking for how do we engage in that patterns of change. So we have new generations coming in as well, even in organizations, right? So that's the basis for that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I'm just wondering, since you mentioned about 99% of the species have disappeared, we're at the edge of what has been called the sixth extinction, the sixth mass extinction of species on this planet. And yes, species come and go, but when there's a mass extinction event, then the rate at which that is happening is much, much higher than the normal times. I think I forget the numbers, but I think we're now at a point where it's happening like something like 1,000 times faster than what would be like a normal, turnover of species. So I'm just wondering, how do we get to this point? You know, how do we create an economy that works for all, that will actually allow us to have a livable future? And for me, you know, media is a huge piece of it, because
Can I mention something on that, and then I'll pass it to Hazel, because
yes,
I'm clear that she
sure,
would like
sure.
to. Hazel, is that all right if I mention
Yeah,
something?
yeah.
Transition? Okay, and just, you know, I think that's very important, because part of the evolution centric, or the evolutionarily informed way of being, the ethics involved in this, is to understand when and how the transitions are important to be supported. Because right now, the mass extinction events that you're talking about, Rick, are not occurring in their natural unfolding. How do we know this? This is part of that systems perspective. It's also part of biomimicry and understanding how nature works. And what we can do, something Hazel talked about earlier, is in education, truly to help develop an educational frame where we learn about relational dynamics, developing a relational intelligence. What is that based on? It's based on, I would say, first, connective intelligence, understanding how we are connected and interconnected, and with what are we connected? Now, with what sources of life? Fundamentally, it's the sun, as Hazel has written about in her books. And so this is an economy of abundance, as she says as well. And in this framework, learning about that in school builds this connective intelligence. We then leverage our connective intelligence into collective intelligence. Collective intelligence can help us then see, how do we actually solve the problems that we can't solve alone? None of us is as smart as all of us, as the saying goes. But for that, we need one more component that I would call empathetic intelligence. And this is what builds for the love economy that Hazel is talking about as well. The empathetic intelligence is something that's not very well developed in our schools these days, but it's learning really how to see others in their full beingness, listening into, caring, right? And this is something that Hazel was mentioning earlier. And this builds the kind of relational intelligence that I think we're starting to see develop in the world. There are many signposts of this. Hazel?
Yeah.
Yes, I just want to emphasize that stress is evolution's tool. All living systems are stressed, and that's what creates the evolution of species, the natural selection idea of Darwin, which was so misappropriated by English elites, you know, who invented this poisonous phrase, the survival of the fittest. Well, Darwin didn't mean that at all. He meant, you know, the fitness of groups in natural selection. But I want to stress, and I've written about this about a week ago, and this is the role of women. And we have to acknowledge a very, very ancient pattern in human species, and that is that males in so many societies all over the world still control women's bodies. And it's all about controlling fertility and reproduction. And the interesting thing is that the model of money-based GDP growth also is the growth of population. And women now are taking charge of their own fertility. And it's very interesting that a recent study was done by two Canadian social scientists called Empty Planet. And they pointed out all of the countries now on this planet can never have GDP growth anymore, because they have fallen below fertility rates. And that includes, the biggest example, of course, is China. And I've been going to China for many years, and I was invited by the State Council in the 1980s and gave lots of lectures, really just saying, please don't use our model of development, leapfrog from our model. And at that point, they had the one-child policy. And then they suddenly realized that they have this fertility collapse going on right now. And so the women, they're urging the women not only to have 2 children now, but to have 3 children. And guess what? The women are saying, no way. We want to be single parents, which they are. They don't want to marry. And they certainly don't want to create lots of children. And whenever women control their own fertility, the population rate goes down. So basically, what I think is actually happening now, which is driving this transition to what some of us have called the Green New Deal, to the empathetic society, which my friend Jeremy Rifkin wrote about. He wrote a wonderful book about the empathetic civilization. And that is emerging through women taking control of their fertility. The thing that's going on in Texas now, is what was a peg on which I wrote this article, which is on our website. Women's rights are human rights. And it folds in directly with the debate going on right now on voting rights. And African-American leaders in the US totally accept this idea that voting rights are human rights, are women's rights. Come on, it's all one thing. Let's stop separating it. So I think the future will really be that instead of the UN projection that the human family will top out at about 10 billion members, that is much more likely that our current 7.8 billion member human family will be more like the future. And that forces the economic change and the change of metrics toward this fully systemic view. All of the other metrics that we use to measure our human growth and also the development of societies on biomimicry principles, so that we can deal, so we ourselves don't become part of the 6th great extinction that's going on right now.
Yeah, exactly. And so part of the shift that I think is important for us to get to that empathic society. It's for me, it's a cultural shift that's needed, because culture kind of suggests what is considered to be the norm in a variety of different places. And for me, the messages of the media, the dominant media, become the fabric of our culture. And so we're at a point now where there are, the media is involved with, the extreme polarization that we see in the United States and other parts around, other countries around the world. And so it's all kind of connected, with culture, media, the intelligences that Alexander was talking about, the caring economy, valuing that. Is that a cultural norm that could become something? So that, like you were saying about the Biden budget for the caring part of the economy, that could help to make that normal.
Yes,
and culturally normal.
This is why I started a media company, Ethical Markets Media.
That's what I was getting to. That's exactly what I wanted to get to, Ethical Markets Media.
You can't even do markets without trust. And I have an article which is also on our website called Reframing the Politics of Polarization. And I did a review of this left-right capitalism versus communism, all of this binary kind of stuff that I saw in Britain where I was growing up there. And you had to be either left or right, you had to be either conservative or Labour. And what I noticed was that the combined membership of both of those political parties was a fraction of the membership of the Royal Society for the Preservation of Birds. And I realized that, my gosh, there was this whole array of wonderful political movements. So I did a circular diagram of that, of all of these different things, people and that are unrepresented in this binary politics. And that's what we're dealing with in the USA. And you're totally correct, Rick, that we not only have mainstream media reinforcing the binary politics, but we also have social media and, the algorithms, the recommendation algorithms on which Facebook's profits depend, which further exacerbates the polarization and everything like that. And one of my beloved friends, Frances Moore Lappé, who taught us all 50 years ago with her Diet for a Small Planet, she I quoted her in this article of mine on the 10 basic things which all Americans agree on by majorities, the very basic things that don't fit into left or right, all these binary categories. So there again, we have to look at faulty metrics and faulty models, which unthinking editors of mainstream media. I mean, the first article I ever wrote was in the Columbia Journalism Review in 1968 called Access to Media, a Problem in Democracy. And so you're absolutely right, Rick, as usual.
I muted myself, sorry. I loved your recent article, Reframing the Politics of Polarization, which you were just talking about. There's so many places where the public has tremendous agreement on things. But of course, when the politicians want to actually use certain labels to create division, they feel like it gets them more support with their base. And it's an aspect of our political system that is it goes so much against this idea of coming together with we consciousness, which we need in order to survive into the future. Anyway, anyone else want to say anything as we're coming up to a close? I know, Alexander, you want to say something, and then maybe Jack, yeah? Go ahead, Alexander.
Just to build one little bit on what Hazel was saying, what you're just commenting here. Right now, what we are tuning into, what we're being swamped with through the media is things that are not necessarily healthy, not necessarily connecting us. It doesn't foster our connective intelligence. It certainly doesn't foster the kind of trust that we need that Hazel is talking about. So it's really our choice. What are we going to tune into? And this is our choice. What do we tune into? There are things we can tune in. Ethical Markets Media provides you with a channel that you can tune into. You can choose to do that. There's at Unity Foundation, they have Positive Spin, which is another television show that has positive news, right? And it's not just looking at only the positive things. We shirk the negative. It's really trying to say, what are the constructive things that we can learn with and do from? So one story that I think is becoming popular now is solar punk. I'm really interested in what the solar punk futures and the visions of people who are doing the arts and the imagery for the kind of future that is based. And I like the whole solar punk movement. It has this kind of little punk revolutionary framework to it, but it's about how do we bring in this solar living world, right? Not steampunk, right? Not cyberpunk. And cyberpunk is pretty depressive, actually, but solar punk, and it's connecting with people. And the last thing I want to say about this is this gets to that evolutionary ethics framework, because there the question is, what is the narrative we want to be a part of? Because we are all the time authoring our lives from moment to moment. We are writing our story. What is the story we want to connect with? And it brings to mind this, this quote from Pablo Neruda, who talked about recuerdos del porvenir, memories of things yet to come. Memories of things yet to come. How can we tap into those bright, positive futures that we know can be, and feed those narratives into our ways of being now, not just dealing with the mundane problems of how do I maximize my return on investment in the next quarterly cycle, right? That's not the bigger narrative of nature and of systems that are interconnected and that are engaged in flourishing. So I think this is our question. How do we tune into, and how do we choose to tune into those things that feed those narratives that we know are the narratives of the thrivable future?
Exactly. And it makes me think of that way of thinking from many indigenous peoples, to consider the next 7 generations when you're deciding to do some action, or any action really. If you think about it, consider what is it going to, what kind of effect is it going to have? What kind of ripple effect will it have going forward in time? So Jack, you wanted to add some things? And you're muted. The 4 most used words during COVID. You are on mute.
Yeah, just a couple times. Well, I just got a couple of quick ones here. One is when Hazel was talking about the bottom part of the pie is nature, and Alexander kind of followed up on that, talking about something very similar. It brings me to thinking about a group called the Global Footprint, and what they do, and I think they do it fairly accurately because they've been around doing it for a long time, and I haven't heard too many people say they're wrong. So basically, last month, early August, we had already consumed on this planet more than Mother Nature can produce in a given year. And obviously we can't keep doing that. So my answer to that is that we take a look at what nature can produce in a reasonably good way, because it's more than just exactly what it gets, but in a flourishing way, or I guess I would like to say. And then you divide that by, what was that, 7.28 billion. And that's our share. And if you're consuming more than that, then you're consuming more than your share. And the other thing I look at is when I talk about the system is broken, and the next system comes up with that. The system is broken, it's broken beyond repair, and we can't fix it, so we need to get a new one. And so when I talk among my activist friends and I say the system is broken, they roll their eyes and they say, Jack, come on, you know better than that. The system is not broken. The system is working very well for those who created it and are running it. And I think that's something we have to really, really think about if we're looking to put together an alternative and new economy, is that there are people out there who have a lot of power and wealth who like it the way it is. So we have to, realize that. And that's my little speech for right now.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for being part of this amazing panel. Hazel Henderson, Alexander Laszlo, Jack Strasberg, and I want to let everybody know again that you can find out about all of these panels that we're doing on all of the 11 themes of for 11 Days of Global Unity by going to we.net. You can connect to the schedule there, and then you can also get involved with We the World and our partners by going there. We really value collaboration. It's key for what we the world is as a concept. And just the words, we the world, it's going to take all of us to create a livable future. So I think on our panel today, we accomplished what we always like to accomplish with our events of We the World. We inspire, inform, and involve. 3 I's that make a we, so that we can go from a me society to a we society. Thank you very much.